So, friends, the month of October started with Donald Trump telling the leaders of the United States military to use American cities as training grounds. But the month ended with some members of the Illinois State National Guard saying they would not obey unlawful orders to deploy to the streets of Chicago. Courage, friends. Courage. Here's a brief recap of the legal stories for the month that was October 2025. So, friends, did you see that depraved clown show that Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth put on for our nation's military leadership? I am pretty darn sure it had an impact, but not the impact that Petey and Donnie had hoped.
Recognizing that the Republicans have the White House, the House, and the Senate, do you think the Dems are going to be able to message that this is a Republican shutdown? How do you see this playing out politically?
So there's been polling from a raft of different firms, Navigator, Morning Consult, about 7 different firms. All of them show that the vast majority of the blame would fall onto Republicans for doing this. But look, I think that the Democrats are actually smart to make their red line here that they want ACA subsidies extended.
So, friends, it looks like Trump flunky Kari Lake may be moving in the direction of contempt proceedings.
So by stripping the ability to follow the rule of law consistently, you're just delegitimizing what we do, both from the public's perception abroad and service members' families and their communities here in the States. So it's deeply concerning.
And rules of engagement keep everyone safe, including our military members. And yet I think Hegseth called them stupid rules of engagement. And, I can't help but think about a variation on the old saying, first thing we do, let's kill all the military lawyers. And then lawlessness can reign supreme in the military. And that is a recipe for disaster. And it's a recipe to endanger our troops, not keep them safe,
Yeah.
So, friends, in 2 cases in particular, Friday was a really bad day in court for Donald Trump, for his administration, and for the DOJ lawyers who are willing to go into court and do Trump's dirty bidding, arguing that Trump's unlawful acts are lawful, arguing that his unconstitutional acts are constitutional, and arguing that his vindictiveness is not vindictive. These are arguments by lawyers that only a propagandist could love. So, friends, the month of September started with Donald Trump militarizing the streets of Washington, D.C., and the month ended with a federal judge, quote, excoriating Trump. That comes from Politico's reporting, excoriating Trump for violating the free speech rights and the rights to assemble of teachers, academics, and students. Friends, justice really is a team sport, and we all need to be in the game. We need to be on the playing field. Nobody left sitting on the sidelines. So, friends, a Trump-appointed judge just ruled that Donald Trump may not unlawfully and unconstitutionally send troops in to Portland, Oregon. Friends, we are seeing in real time how the pen, the judicial pen, really is mightier than the sword. So, friends, a top DOJ prosecutor has concluded that there is no probable cause to indict New York Attorney General Letitia James for alleged mortgage fraud, which proves the point that even though Attorney General Pam Bondi and some of the leadership at the Department of Justice is corrupt, willing to do Donald Trump's dirty bidding, there are still tens of thousands of honest, ethical DOJ lawyers doing the work of the American people rather than the work of the autocrat in the Oval Office. It's a really dark day for the rule of law. It's a really dark day for the nation because, by all accounts, this is nothing more than a vindictive prosecution brought by a revenge-fueled president of the United States. But I hope when history records what happened on this day, it actually is a point of light, because I have a feeling this prosecution will fall apart spectacularly.
The New York Times reported that Donald Trump informed Congress that he has determined the U.S. is now in a war with drug cartels. He is now labeling these people unlawful combatants and saying that we are presently in an armed conflict with them. So, Dan, let's start there. Is there any indication these things are true?
No. First things first, when an executive branch officer like the president makes a decision, the assumption is that it's based on facts, colorable facts. Presidents are given a lot of discretion by courts when it's reviewed to make those determinations, because usually presidents are exposed to information that the rest of us aren't, right? They have the CIA, they have the NSA, they've got military stations all over the world. They have access to information and intelligence that most people don't. So they're the chief diplomat, they're the commander-in-chief, they have access to these resources. And so they're given deference. When they make a decision, courts generally say, well, look, we might not agree, but we might not know all the facts. But all that is based on the presumption that presidents aren't lying.
So, friends, federal judges, one after another, are using the United States Constitution as a shield against Donald Trump's tyranny. Well, friends, it looks like the Trump administration is on quite a roll with these vindictive prosecutions, aren't they? First, James Comey, and now Letitia James. Well, friends, can I tell you something as a career prosecutor? These cases will fail spectacularly.
I got to thinking about the vindictive indictments that are rolling in, and there's reporting that more are on the way, specifically John Bolton. Looks like he is on the verge of being indicted. And as we sort of collect vindictive indictments and look at them as kind of a batch, there are some things that I wanted to unpack a little bit tonight, and that is all vindictive indictments are not created equal. What is your take on the fact that federal court judges are so willing to talk openly about the Supreme Court, when I think in our lifetime that has not been mum is the word when it comes to lower court judges talking about the rulings or the approach that superior court judges, federal circuit courts of appeal, Supreme Court justices are taking in these cases?
I think they're probably panicked and they're afraid.
Yeah.
They're afraid for the future of the republic, the future of the country, the future of the rule of law. What is the rule of law? The rule of law means there's a set of rules, laws, starting with the Constitution, that apply to everybody in the country.
So, friends, we remain on vindictive prosecution watch. First, former FBI Director James Comey was vindictively indicted by Donald Trump, Pam Bondi, and Lindsay Halligan. Then, New York State Attorney General Letitia James was vindictively indicted. And now, based on some new reporting, it looks like John Bolton, Donald Trump's former national security advisor, may be on deck for the next vindictive prosecution. So, friends, Donald Trump's vindictive prosecution of former FBI Director James Comey is barely 1 week old, and Donald Trump's DOJ attorneys have already suffered their first defeat in the case. But it gets even worse for them, because what they just tried to do to James Comey before the judge shut them down, denying their motion, what they just tried to do may actually add fuel to James Comey's vindictive prosecution defense. Well, friends, we now have a third criminal indictment against a Donald Trump enemy. This time, his former national security advisor, John Bolton. John Bolton now takes his place next to other criminally indicted Trump enemies, former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James. And I think the question at this moment is the Bolton indictment as vindictive, as unconstitutional as the indictments of Comey and James? So, friends, a top DOJ prosecutor has concluded that there is no probable cause to indict New York Attorney General Letitia James for alleged mortgage fraud, which proves the point that even though Attorney General Pam Bondi and some of the leadership at the Department of Justice is corrupt, willing to do Donald Trump's dirty bidding, there are still tens of thousands of honest, ethical DOJ lawyers doing the work of the American people rather than the work of the autocrat in the Oval Office. How do you keep, environmental justice front and center in the conversation on the agenda? How do we do that?
Every way possible. I talk about it, and talk is the value in this issue. And everybody has a right to talk about this issue. And I encourage this. I think sometimes people underplay their own agency, their own ability to influence other people. And I'm serious about this. Anybody who's a fan of your shows, I believe, can be persuasive in their own circles. That means at the dinner table with their recalcitrant uncle. That means in their church. That means where they work. And I really encourage people to use their own leadership in their own communities because it can really have an impact. Look, we're social animals. We influence each other.
We don't hate America. We love America. We love it enough to fight for the future of America, for our kids, our grandkids, your grandkids, and everybody else. Because I'll be damned if this group of imbeciles and incompetents are going to end American democracy. Not on our watch. Not on our watch. So, friends, it's not just the judges who are standing up to Donald Trump's lawlessness. It's also the citizens. Citizens serving as grand jurors. And in recent days, 12 citizens who served as trial jurors. So let's be clear. Whether it's 7 million people in the streets of America or 12 people sitting in a wooden box in a courtroom in Washington, D.C., it is the people who have the power. So, friends, with some congressional Republicans beginning to push back, might Donald Trump finally be going too far? So, friends, on the political front, do you think Donald Trump is getting stronger or weaker? One of the sure indicators, one of the important data points on that question is whether Trump can still cram down the throats of Senate Republicans his unqualified hack nominees. And guess what? Donald Trump just failed in that endeavor again. So friends, as you undoubtedly know, Donald Trump had one of his unqualified flunkies, now U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan, vindictively indict New York Attorney General Letitia James. Attorney General James' first court appearance is this Friday in federal court in Norfolk, Virginia. I sat down with another career federal prosecutor, my friend Kevin Flynn, to do something of a preview of James' first court appearance and to talk about the absurdity of U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan reaching out to a reporter on a disappearing Signal chat app to, just chat about the prosecution of Letitia James. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, I just got back from the federal courthouse in Norfolk, Virginia, where I attended the arraignment hearing in the prosecution. I'm going to call it like it is, the vindictive prosecution, the selective prosecution, the revenge-fueled prosecution by Donald Trump of New York State Attorney General Letitia James. So friends, once again, courts have put a stop, albeit a temporary one, to Donald Trump's determination to militarize the streets of Portland, Oregon. Can you just tell our Team Justice folks how it is that you and I first kind of came to know each other and started working together?
Yeah, absolutely, Glenn. Maybe it was 2020. Maybe it was in the beginning of the pandemic. Anyway, thank goodness the YouTube algorithm brought me one of your videos. And of course, I was immediately blown away, enthralled by how your messaging, how you spoke, your passion. You were saying what we were all feeling, and it really resonated. However, every time I would watch your video every day, I'd be like, man, that intro is so janky, man. It's like for such like a 30-year seasoned professional, we got to sit through that opening.
Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, I'm sure you've seen this absurd story. Donald Trump is demanding that the Department of Justice, his Department of Justice, that he fully controls at this point, pay him $230 million, nearly $250 million in taxpayer money. Why? Well, he claims that, DOJ had the nerve to investigate crimes he was suspected of committing, among other things. As I recall, he ended up being indicted for some of those crimes. But he said, no, they had no right to do any of that. And they damaged me. They injured me to the tune of nearly $250 million. He actually has alleged that the FBI, the Department of Justice, federal prosecutors violated his privacy rights when they searched Mar-a-Lago. Friends, a federal judge reviewed the evidence, the affidavit, the application for a search warrant for Mar-a-Lago, and based on the evidence, the judge concluded there was probable cause to believe that evidence of crime would be located right then and there at Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump's, residence/resort located in Palm Beach County, Florida. And indeed, there was evidence of crime found there. But Donald Trump tries to spin that like it's a violation of his privacy rights. This claim is absurd on its face, and there are 100 reasons why it shouldn't be paid out by the Department of Justice, by the federal government. But I wanted to sit down and talk with somebody who is intimately familiar not only with these circumstances, but with Palm Beach County, Florida itself, where Mar-a-Lago is located. So I sat down with my friend, former state's attorney for Palm Beach County for a dozen years, Dave Arenberg. And we discussed the ins and outs of this truly insane request that DOJ should pay Donald Trump $250 million for violating his privacy interests. So, friends, after seeing evidence of some of the brutal tactics ICE agents are using against the people of Chicago, a federal judge just ordered the head of that operation, a guy named Gregory Bovino, who is described as the, quote, border control commander at large. You may have seen, that's the guy caught on video casually lobbing a tear gas canister into a crowd of protesters. The judge just ordered Bovino to appear in her courtroom daily while she litigates these claims of essentially abusive conduct by federal agents. So, friends, it's been a really bad 24 hours for Donald Trump and his administration, and a really good 24 hours for we the people. Let's take on three stories in rapid succession. First, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals just granted en banc review, full bench review, hopefully to put a more permanent stop to Donald Trump's efforts to militarize the streets of Portland. Second, Senate Republicans just joined Senate Democrats to put a stop to Donald Trump's ongoing tariff tantrums, specifically his idiotic tariffs on Brazil. And third, and this is probably my favorite one, a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney in California was just DQ'd, disqualified from serving as U.S. attorney because Donald Trump appointed him unlawfully. And friends, this story could have an impact on the vindictive indictments that Lindsay Halligan obtained for James Comey and Letitia James. Friends, at this moment, we have some bright points of light working. So, friends, there's some breaking news involving two federal prosecutors in my former office, the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office. And what we're learning is these two federal prosecutors put some truthful, accurate, necessary information in a court filing, in what's called a sentencing memorandum, for a defendant who is about to be sentenced by a judge after being convicted at trial. And because that sentencing memorandum said that there had been an attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th and also provided some context for the crimes that this defendant had been convicted of, which were not January 6 crimes, but that was relevant to the sentencing of this particular defendant. That memo also referenced Donald Trump one time. And within hours of that court filing, these two federal prosecutors, doing the hard, honest, ethical work of the American people, had their government phones seized, were locked out of their government computers, and were ejected from the United States Attorney's Office, walked out of the building for telling the truth to a federal judge in a court filing. So, friends, from soldiers standing up and speaking out, announcing that they will not obey unlawful orders, to the Trump administration continuing to murder people in international waters, to Donald Trump saying that he can deploy soldiers to U.S. cities and even the courts can't stop him. America is in a very tough spot. Some might even say our nation is in peril. Let's talk about that, because justice matters.
It's for sure. Justice matters. Justice matters. Justice matters.